Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to cover the home teams, as we always do. The New Orleans Saints, the LSU Tigers, the New Orleans Pelicans. We hope to get to the Tulane Green Wave. Your phone calls at about 45 minutes after the hour, and of course, a great panel for you tonight. Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune and Les East, freelance journalist, both join us on the panel tonight. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being with us. We always like to start off letting the folks know a little bit about what you're involved in. Jeff, why don't you start us off?
Well, I mean, we're really moving and shaking right now. It's kind of a busy time of year with college football and the Pelicans getting going. Of course, big announcement today, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the Final Four. It's a feather in the cap for the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation. So we got a lot of irons in the fire, but it makes it fun, makes the week go by quick.
Yes, it does. Les, welcome back.
Thanks.
And you're involved in a heck of a lot, so let's get it rolling. Tell the folks a little bit about it.
Well, in addition to working with my friend here at NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, I'm doing some work for SportsNOLA.com. Been doing some sideline reporting for WHNO-TV for prep football, and a variety of other entities, local and national, and just covering all the stuff around here that he's been covering just as much.
Well, thank you guys for coming down. I really appreciate it. Let's start off. Good news for New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. The NCAA has awarded the city of New Orleans the 2022 Men's Final Four. And guys, this has been a great event. Of course, we're not in the mix like we once were. It's been going to be about a decade before we see that next Final Four. But nevertheless, this is fantastic news for the city.
Yeah, I think especially after striking out so many times recently, a couple Super Bowl bids we've lost out on. We lost out on some Final Four bids. So it's good news, and I know how hard those guys work down at the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation, and we need to get back in that mix. But it's going to be, like you said, more of a decade, every other decade proposition to get these big events because they become so competitive, especially for the Final Fours. They don't have nearly as high of a threshold to cover for the host cities as far as hotel rooms and all the economic benefits that they require, that the Super Bowl requires. So it's even more competitive for the Final Four. I'd just like to see us get back maybe some semblance of college basketball interest. I mean, it is the worst I've ever seen it in the state.
Agreed.
Nobody's any good. And 13 Division I programs, and nobody's any good. I'd like to see somebody get back there, so maybe by that time we'd have somebody with the hope of getting in.
Right. Like it was when they first started coming to New Orleans, where LSU and even LSU was definitely in the mix. Even Tulane had a pretty good program back then as well.
Yeah, in fact, if not for Dale Brown building up the LSU program the way he did, I'm not sure that New Orleans would have carved out the footprint it had for college basketball back when it was coming here more regularly, and certainly Perry Clark had Tulane going to the postseason as well. It would be great to have good local college basketball coincide with that, but this is obviously a big event coming here. New Orleans, understandably so, is not really known as a basketball town. So when those opportunities come, we need to make the most of it, and I think we always do make the most of it. But when you're out of it for as long as we've been out of it, and when you don't have a reputation like a place like Indianapolis and some other places, it's kind of easy to be forgotten by the basketball community. So the fact that they decided to come back here after a fairly long absence, I think, is a very positive sign.
Jeff, how will this affect the bidding for the next Super Bowl, if at all?
No, I don't think it'll affect it at all. It's really kind of apples and oranges in the bidding process. I think we're going to get the next Super Bowl, but it's going to be 3 years before they even bid on another one. But you could almost read between the lines when Roger Goodell addressed the media at the Charlotte NFL owners meetings last spring. I mean, he recognized that this is now 2 in a row that New Orleans has lost out on Super Bowls, and that he knows we're not used to that. And they want to come back here. The league wants to come back. They've just got to fulfill all those obligations of rewarding these communities that have built new stadiums.
Right. That's 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right? That'll be the next one that'll be bid on. So there's a possibility of 2021 having the Super Bowl, 2022 having the Final Four, which would be nice, back to back.
Yeah, we had a run like that recently.
We did.
And you know, now that we're getting the NBA All-Star game this year, I think we'll get another one of those in time. So look, people are always going to want to come to New Orleans. The economy is booming here. A lot of great things, so I think this is just a reflection of where we're at as a city.
We've had this discussion before. Lester, your thoughts on the Superdome, the longevity of the facility, and the ability to be able to still be in the mix to host these big events, let's say past 2025?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it's fairly remarkable that it's still as viable as it is after all these years, and that goes to the renovations that have been done there. But there aren't a lot of stadiums that old that can still keep you in the mix, and how long they can keep that up, I'm really not sure. You know, as Jeff alluded to, you know, the last 2 times you lost a Super Bowl, it's simply because other people built new stadiums. And certainly what happened with the last one here, with the lights going out, even though that may be an unfair blemish on the facility's eye, nonetheless it's out there in national perception. So how long they can keep the Superdome going, I don't know exactly how long, but I think it's remarkable that they've kept it going this long, and I think it's still going to be viable well into the future.
Jeff, I think the Saints, their contract with the city is up and the state is up. Is it 2024, 2025? 25. Do you anticipate this being part of the mix of the new negotiations with the New Orleans Saints in 2025 and a new Superdome, an enhanced Superdome? What do you think happens there?
I think more than likely it'll be an enhanced Superdome. I don't think they ever want to leave that site. It's such a good site, incredibly valuable real estate, and there's only so many places we could build a new stadium. There's just not very much land right now, so it just makes sense to me, and having conversations with some of the people involved, I think they would lean towards some kind of major renovation and keeping it in that same spot, and that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt, especially now with what looks like the convention center trying to be able to develop that land across on the riverfront, which was a possibility of building a stadium there. We're pretty much landlocked at this point. I don't think there will be any other place. And plus, remember, we were really the first city to go with that downtown stadium footprint that other cities have tried to mimic.
Well, and that's an important thing, because if you were to leave that site, you'd probably have to go a pretty good distance away from the city to do it, and then you're forfeiting one of your big advantages. Everybody says New Orleans is so compact that's one of the biggest advantages we have, and to abandon that just wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I think technology is advanced so much right now. I could see by that time where they incorporate new technology, like what we see up in Minneapolis, where Minnesota's new stadium, where they've opened up the windows. I could see them putting a window-like roof on the dome, opening up, even having some type of hydraulic technology that would open up the sides of the building and keep it open air. Those type things will be in the mix for a major renovation in 10 years, and it could change the entire experience for the Saints fans at the Superdome.
And of course, the big roadblock has always been the terrace, the way the building is built and the way the terrace is. And by that time, you hope that there is technology out there that you will be able to retrofit that terrace to make it more fan-friendly.
Yeah, I think that'll be something that they talk about. Because you're right. Right now, pretty much the skeleton and the bones of that building are intact, and it's hard to really do anything major without a complete teardown.
No doubt. Let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. Pleasantly surprised, I think a lot of people are right now, that the Saints have won 4 of their last 5, starting off the first quarter of the season as 0-3. Then, of course, now, 3-1 in the second quarter, 41-23 win over the San Francisco 49ers. And, guys, the thing that has really caught my eye about this team over the last few weeks is, and I go to the coaching staff, and I go to Sean Payton, when 2009, when this team was on a roll, and a lot of the reason why they won the Super Bowl was obviously the defense that created 39 turnovers, which was, and of course you had that shock and awe offense. But they ran the football to complement the passing game. Payton over the last few weeks has been very, very disciplined in running the football, and again, the offensive line looks like it's flourishing, running the football, and they've got 2 big backs that right now are proven they can run it effectively. It's the first time we've seen this in a while, and I think that is one of the byproducts of why we've seen this team win the last few weeks.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. Now, whether they can continue to do that, I mean, everybody they play each week isn't going to be as bad as San Francisco.
True.
I mean, that's the worst run defense in the league. So that game wasn't as impressive to me as the Seattle game, running it against that front 7. And what you alluded to, he's being patient with it. They didn't break off any major runs in that game, but it's keeping them in these attainable down and distance scenarios, and that's why they're converting third downs at such a high rate. And Breeze, as we all know, he's a Jedi on third down. He's incredible at converting those third downs, and that demoralizes the defense. It wears them out, and that's helping the Saints defense because it's keeping them off the field, frankly. And I know that they played a little better when you look at the numbers, but I'm still not convinced that's a good defense. Now they're getting some guys back, but they're just not on the field very much right now, so it's helping their numbers.
Which is what they honestly, when you have a weakness at defense like that, you want to run the football. And I mean, look, he seems to be disciplined enough to do that now. That in the past he'd get a little pass happy.
Well, he's disciplined when it's working. So as long as they're having the success they're having, I think he will stick with it. The problem is when they have a lack of success early, sometimes he gets away from it too quickly. But I think the offensive line seems to be coming together as a unit. Obviously, the presence or absence of Teron Armstead makes a big difference in that. But offensive line looks like it's doing better. And I think another thing is some of these young receivers that have developed over the last year or two that they brought in and have gotten better have made the passing game more consistent, even though they've obviously always had a good passing game. I think last year, while they went through some growing pains at the wide receiver position, it wasn't as consistent as it is now. And I think that's enabled them to run the ball a little bit better, too, because they're more consistent in the passing game.
And I'll say this, I'll piggyback on that, and Jeff, I'd like you to touch on as well. One thing we've seen when the Saints have been successful in running the football, the abilities for receivers to block downfield, whether it's Brandon Coleman, whether it's Michael Thomas, again, who is a newcomer, whether it's Cooks or Snead, all those guys are good downfield blockers, and that's helped the running game.
Yeah, and I think also in that same mix, having Josh Hill out there. Josh Hill is a very good blocker, and there's no question. Right now, that offense is firing on all cylinders. I mean, they're moving the ball on everybody in the league. They're approaching the 2011, 2009 standard as far as efficiency. And when they're like that, I mean, they can play with anybody in the league. Because Breeze is converting on. I keep bringing up third down, but I think that's such an underappreciated part of his game. He's so smart. He's been in that system so long, and he has the confidence of Sean Payton and the rest of the staff that he can get to the line of scrimmage and get them in the right play and overcome it. And that's something that's going to be critical against Denver because they've got that great pass rush and that great secondary. They don't want to be in a lot of third and longs going against this team.
No doubt. And unless, staying with the theme of discipline, this team has been disciplined over the last few weeks. Against Kansas City, they were a little penalty happy. But over the last, when you look at this over the last couple of weeks, they have not been the one committing the infractions for the most part.
Yeah, and that's huge because earlier in the year that was a problem. Certainly Kansas City was an example of that. And, I got to admit that this team is progressing over the last month better than I thought it would. I think I was on this show before the season started, and I thought the ceiling was pretty low for this team. I said, I don't think it's possible to win fewer than 7 games if you have Drew Brees for a whole season, but I didn't know if they could go much above that. Now, maybe they can. I don't want to get carried away with this stretch they're on now, but the defense has shown some improvement. They're getting healthier there. more balance on offense. Offensive line is better. If they continue to eliminate the mistakes, like he said, I think this team right now is a little better than I thought it would be, and it looks like it might be able to continue to improve. I got to say, they're better than I thought they would be at this point.
Jeff, piggyback on that. Your thoughts?
Well, I think Peyton and his staff have done a great job. I mean, that's kind of being overlooked in all this, but they've made a lot of changes. I mean, they've gone with younger linebackers. They've not been afraid to change the roles of guys like James Laurinaitis and Jarris Byrd, big-name players that, frankly, they paid a lot of money for. They're not afraid to go with guys that are outperforming them.
Yes.
And they've done the same thing on the offensive line. They found a home for Andres Pete. That looked like a weakness at the beginning of the year, the offensive line. Now it's a strength. So I've been really impressed with how they've managed to tread water with all the problems they've had on defense. And it's like this around the league. But the Saints, when you look at them, they've been able to plug the gap at certain positions. And now I think with all these guys coming back, I mean, they're going to be pretty formidable. But were they in too big a hole to extract themselves from? I mean, the schedule, in my opinion, these next 4 games, they've got to win 3 of them. It's a critical stretch. They got 3 of the 4 at home. And the last 4 games of the year, they play 3 of the 4 on the road. So they got to make their hay now. And I think they've got a real possibility if they can win this game on Sunday at the Dome.
Offensive line was mentioned. It was looked at as a weakness. A lot of us, myself included, when you looked at the guard position, that looked like a weakness going into this season. It was manna from heaven to be able to get Jari Evans back, a guy that's playing not injured. He may not be the Jari Evans of old, but you know what? He's still a darn good guard. You've seen the tandem of Streif and Evans now. I think Streif graded out on Pro Football Focus as the best right tackle in football during the first half of the season. These guys know each other. You know, it's like a dancing partner. They've been great on the right side. Andres Pete has turned into a pretty good guard. He's been, I think he's excelling in the running game. And even though they've had to move out to the left tackle at times, he still played well at both the left tackle in terms of protecting the pass, but also playing well in the run. And, you know, when Armstead is in there, obviously he's playing at a pretty high level, even on one leg. And, of course, Unger's just gets anchored in the middle. That's a pretty darn good offensive line. And even the guys they've had to bring in Alito and Clemente and spots, they played well. You haven't seen a drop-off.
Yeah, I think they have played well, and I think in Andres Pete's case, you know, he's gotten a little stability. I think that helps him in the preseason, not only game to game, almost series to series. You didn't know what position he was going to be at because of injuries, and he wasn't even able to practice in the same spot all the time. So I think being able to sort of limit the amount that he's had to move around during the regular season has helped a lot. Jari Evans obviously has helped a lot, even though he used to be maybe the best guard in the NFL. So even if he drops off a bit, he's still pretty good. So that's a good unit. And sometimes maybe we forget the trickle-down effect that the offensive line has, because if you run the ball and protect the quarterback, then you have balance on offense. The run and the pass both become easier. It keeps your defense off the field. It keeps your defense fresh. It changes field position even when you're not scoring. And so if you go from a below-average offensive line to one that's maybe a little above average, which this one appears to be right now, that can make a huge difference throughout your team. And I think they're reaping the benefits of that right now.
And Breeze always helps with his ability to be able to maneuver within the pocket, to be able to make more time, especially, you know, when they drop back in the passing game.
He's brilliant at that. Yeah. I think one of the other underappreciated aspects of his game is his ability to stay out of negative plays. I mean, how many sacks does he avoid getting rid of the ball or just dancing around or just using his wits to get rid of the ball? And sometimes it might be dangerous, but he stays out of those and keeps drives alive. And then you look around the league, I mean, look, Denver struggled with their offensive line. Seattle, we saw them. They've struggled. Minnesota's struggling. I mean, it's very difficult to find a good five up front right now. That's one of the hardest positions, I think, to fill right now in the league, to find quality offensive linemen. The Saints are doing a lot better than a lot of teams right now. And you're right, they've got good depth because these guys have been forced into action. So I see it as a major strength. And I talked to Zach Streif before the season in training camp comparing this line, and he felt like as time went on and Pete came along, that they'd have the chance to be a really good unit. And he said that's the key. As long as he's been there, has been the offensive line.
I think Evans has made the difference. Once he was able to come in, knowing the system, not finally healthy, playing next to a guy he's played together next to 11 years, that really has helped this offensive line.
Makes you wonder, what was Seattle thinking?
Really?
I mean, their offensive line is horrific.
Right.
And they cut him. They had him out there. I still don't understand that, if he wasn't the right fit or he wasn't learning the system quickly enough, but that's really a puzzler.
Well, and look, down the line, they've got to address it because these guys are aging. There's no doubt about it, especially on the right side. But right now, they're playing pretty well. Saints got a little bit of bad news today with Kenny Vaccaro. Looks like he's going to have to sit out 4 games, violating the drug abuse policy for the NFL. Supposedly had used Adderall. Man, he's been playing so well. This is a guy that again, when you look at this team, I think he's been one of the more steady players on the defense, but also he's become a vocal leader on the defense as well. And how big of a hit is this going to be for this team over 4 games with him out?
Well, I think that's one position they do have depth, though. So you're right, he's played very well. I mean, he's kind of the joker wild card player back there, plays a lot at the line. I've seen him doing a lot of ad-lib stuff, too. I think they've got the confidence in him that he's going to help in blitz off the edge. So obviously it's going to be a blow if he's out because he's playing so well. He's one of their leading tacklers. But, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's something that I think he's going to play this weekend, and then probably he's going to have to sit after that.
Right. Guys, any chance he can appeal this? Was this one of the things that he had exhausted an appeal before they came forward with it? Does anybody have any idea, Les?
I don't know the details of it, but unless he's going to have something pretty concrete to have any kind of case. I don't think it's likely that they're going to get it overturned, and it makes you wonder how something like this happens. I mean, it's pretty clear cut what you can and can't take, even if it's something that's just a minor part of a particular drug that might be an over-the-counter type thing, something relatively innocuous. In his case, it was Adderall. And you're going to be tested during the course of the season. You don't know when, but if you know what the substances are and you know that you're going to be tested during the season, why would you put yourself in that position? And I just think it's unfortunate that would happen because it's going to hurt him, it's going to hurt the defense, and that something like that really probably shouldn't happen in these days.
Right. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I mean, just the only thing I can think of is that Adderall, of course, was the same substance that Garrett Hartley got suspended for a few years back. And you're right, Les. I mean, there's pretty much a no tolerance on those kind of violations. So I think he's staring at a 4-game suspension.
Which is a shame because he's been playing very, very well this season. They get Bro back, they get Rankins back, they get Moore back. All of a sudden, it looked like, again, this defense was starting to get some of their key players back, which would have made them a little bit more formidable. This is going to be a big loss here. Your thoughts on the return of those 2 guys?
Well, look, I mean, we've been on this show before and talked about how many mistakes this team's made in free agency and in the draft. I think sometimes we have to tip the cap when they've made some good moves. A guy like Sterling Moore, B.W. Webb. I mean, these are street free agents that anybody in the league could have signed, and they're playing very well. I mean, they're holding their own out there, and these guys were just on the street. And I think it's a reflection of the work of Terry Fontenot, the pro personnel director, and Jeff Ireland, plugging those guys in and tread, like I said earlier, treading water. Look, they weren't dominant. Dennis Allen adjusted his defense, and that's why you didn't see him blitzing very much. You didn't see him coming after the quarterback. Couldn't afford to with the inexperience on the back end, and now they got Delvin Breaux back. It has a domino effect on the rest of the secondary.
And well, the 2 guys who came back last week, I think that's huge. Sheldon Rankins, I think most everybody thought that was a good, solid, smart pick. When they took him, unfortunately, he gets hurt in training camp and gets set back pretty significant ways. And now he comes in, played a lot of reps last week, gave him something on the defensive line that was significant. So I think his return is really important. And being such a young guy, I think you're going to see an accelerated development by him being able to get out there on Sundays, and Delvin Breaux being presumably their best cover corner at a position that's had a lot of injuries. I don't know that you could have gotten a much bigger boost in 1 week than those 2 guys coming back, and I don't think either one was 100%. So if they get healthier as we go along, I think they're going to continue to add more to that defense.
And Moore goes to the slot, which, again, he's played fairly well. And then you look at what Robinson has done now, moved into the middle linebacker position, and the cerebral Nate Stupar, who has come in and played very, very well. Both those guys, by a lot of pundits, was thought to be guys that maybe would have been backups, that would have been guys that would have been on special teams. Both guys have played very, very well for at the linebacker position.
Well, those 2 turnovers that they produced last week were both massive. I mean, when's the last time we saw a linebacker like Nate Robinson read a quarterback's eyes and make an instinctive jump on the ball and return it that sets up a touchdown? Then Stupar, just with a complete hustle play, knocks that ball. I mean, they were getting ready to punch that in, and all of a sudden it's a 1-score game. The Saints were really reeling defensively. That was a huge play. It was a great hustle play, and I think those 2 guys have solidified the linebacker position. And, you know, we talked about the secondary earlier. I mean, but when you get to next year and P.J. Williams and Damian Swann, assuming they can come back, suddenly the secondary looks like a strength.
Well, especially with again, seeing that Crawley has some ability.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, there's no doubt. They've got some young players back there that they can come back healthy. That ought to be a strength for sure. Guys, it's a big stretch, as you mentioned. You've got the world champions coming into the Dome on Sunday with a short week, going up to Carolina to take the Super Bowl runner-ups on. It's always tough to play Carolina no matter what. It's a physical team. They know each other. You're doing that on a short week after Denver. This is, as you mentioned, it's a big stretch automatically, but to play these 2 teams in such a short span, the schedule maker didn't do them any favors.
No, I mean, look, you're playing the 2 Super Bowl teams back-to-back and playing the Panthers on short rest. That's why I think if they can just win one of these games, these next 2, it puts them in position coming back home against the Rams. And I forget who they have after that. Is it Tampa or somebody at home?
Tampa, yes.
So those are winnable games in the Dome. If they can win one of these 2, they could easily go 3-4 in this next stretch. But I think that game in Carolina is going to be very difficult. I mean, it's short rest. Carolina's got their act together. They've won 2 in a row. They've got a home game this week. They could win 3 in a row, and all of a sudden they're rejuvenated. I think that's going to be the toughest test. I think they've got a great shot of winning.
Plus, it's hard to beat them twice.
Yeah, and I mean, look how they barely beat them last time. I mean, as well as they played, they still barely outlasted them. Yeah. And I think Carolina's got a lot of pride on that team and the way they started. I think they were 1-5. Now they feel like they can get back in it. And look, Atlanta's got to go to Philadelphia this week. They've got a difficult stretch, even though they're playing well and they've kind of separated themselves. I think they're going to come back to the pack a little bit. I don't think they're going to implode, but I think they're going to come back, and that's just going to give more life to teams like Carolina.
Yep. What can you add, Les?
Well, you know, from week to week in the NFL, things change so dramatically. You know, you talk about the 2 Super Bowl teams. A few weeks ago, Denver was kind of looking the part. They were still playing great defense. They were playing just well enough on offense, got off to a good start. Carolina looked like it was headed for a disastrous season. Now Carolina is probably the more difficult of the 2 opponents. Broncos still playing good defense, but not as dominant as they were. Lots of problems at the quarterback position. Carolina seems to be finding itself these last couple of weeks, and that one being on the road, I think, is probably the tougher of the 2 right now. But yeah, if they can split these 2, I think that's good enough. If somehow they could win both of those, that would be enormous. I don't know if they're up to that right now, but you know, 2 weeks from now, things could look different because things change so quickly in the NFL.
Yeah, no doubt. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE with our live broadcast. You can catch us on Friday night at 10 o'clock here on WLAE. Also on Pelican Sports Television, that is 9 p.m. every Friday night. Les East and Jeff Duncan are our guests. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Don't go anywhere.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or amcofencecompany.com.
TikTok Cafe, located on Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our menu offers breakfast dishes like our Western omelet made from scratch biscuits, grits, egg sunny side up, and lunch specials like our homemade cheeseburgers with a side of golden brown fries. Don't forget about our weekday lunch special and that every Tuesday is steak night. TikTok Cafe, open 24/7 at Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Jeff Duncan and Les East are our guests tonight. Alabama over LSU, shut them out 10-0. The Tigers now 5-3, 3-2 in the SEC. Guys, I think I talked about this last year at this time. You know, when you match up these two teams and you look at, you know, recruiting and, you know, what they're bringing in on a year-to-year basis, Alabama is just a better team than LSU. It's a better program right now. I know that a lot of LSU fans want to maybe shrink the gap here, but it seems to be proven out each and every year. Now, it's sad that a great defensive performance was wasted like we saw, but you know, you got to give credit to Nick Saban and the Alabama program for continuing to again play at a very, very high level and the type of players they're bringing in, year out.
You know, it reminds me of back in the days when the Jim Morris Saints were in the same division as the Niners.
That is,
and Bill Walsh. Yes. I mean, they couldn't get over them, but no one could. No one's better than Alabama right now. So they just have the misfortune of not only being in the same conference, but the same division as the greatest dynasty in modern college football. And they're just remarkable. I'm amazed at how they came into that environment. And I was at that game. I mean, it was amped at Tiger Stadium. And LSU played very well, and Alabama just kept coming. They're unfazed by all those intangible aspects in a football game, and eventually they're like cyborg robots. They just wear you down and eventually break through. They're just remarkable, and I think they're on their way to another national title.
I think one of the things that's probably discouraging about this particular game, even though it was a little more competitive than maybe last year, or at least on the scoreboard. It kind of had that feel of the BCS game, you know, that they could have played for days, and LSU wasn't going to score. One of the things that separated this program over the last few years is the fact that Alabama has kept players longer than LSU. LSU's had more players go to the NFL early. They're constantly having to bring in young players to replace them. Yes. This year they had a lot of guys coming back. They have a lot of seniors on this team. That wasn't necessarily an advantage for Alabama this year. I don't think it was in terms of experience, and yet LSU still couldn't match up with them, mainly because they didn't have the playmakers on offense. They didn't have the offensive line either. But that's one advantage Alabama has generally had. It didn't have this year, and it didn't make any difference. It's like Jeff said, that they're the best program in the country. So, yeah, LSU doesn't measure up to them as well as you would like, but neither does anybody else.
Coach O said that the offensive line is going to have to get bigger. A friend of mine sent me the information this week. I don't follow recruiting, you know, to the nth degree, but, you know, LSU is littered with 4- and 5-star players on that offensive line. It'll be interesting to see how this changes going forward, because this is, you know, multiple years now that the LSU offensive line has been dominated.
Yeah, that's probably the most glaring thing, other than maybe the quarterback position in recent years. I think this particular unit, you don't have a lot of size. You don't have a lot of true tackles on this team. You got a lot of guys playing out of position. And because of injuries earlier in the year, you've had to move a lot of guys around. So, you know, you hope to have 5 good linemen and hope that the unit is greater than the collection of parts. I don't think the unit is better than the collection of parts, because they don't have prototype tackles and they've had to move guys around. Maybe it's stabilizing a little bit now, getting some guys healthy, but you know, they got 3 losses now and the Alabama game's out the way, so I don't know how much good that's going to do them going down the stretch.
It's interesting he talks about you know, the shuffling of that offensive line. It's been written about a lot this week. Your thoughts on the offensive line?
Well, I think it's what we're seeing is something of an indictment on Les Miles and his staff's ability to evaluate offensive line talent. You know, they've put some guys in the NFL, but no real superstars. Like probably Lyle Collins and I'm blanking on his name at Carolina, but you know,
the guard,
Trey Turner.
Yeah, Trey Turner. Those are probably the 2. I mean, we're not going to go all the way back to Andrew Whitworth, but these guys are solid players, but they haven't been dominant up front. Certainly not the way Alabama is putting out offensive linemen. And I think that that's an area that they need to get better at, whether it's changing the coaching out or changing their evaluation, because those guys they were dominated up front. Right. And when you've got a back like Leonard Fournette and Darius Geis, you should be getting way more than 2 yards a carry.
Yeah. You know, Danny Etling did a great job for this team up until Alabama. A game manager, a guy that was able to go through his progressions. We knew the windows would be tight. We knew he was going to be under duress. He did not perform well against Alabama. LSU can get away, it looks like, with a game manager every single week, with the exception when they got to do that first Saturday in November tilt against Alabama. Should the next coaching staff be looking for a more dynamic quarterback, a quarterback that has the ability to be able to run? I'm not going to say you're going to get a guy like Hurts that's going to be able to come in and play for you, but is that the mold that LSU should be looking at?
Well, it's not if Coach O is the guy, it's not going to be what he wants. I mean, he's already said, pro-style quarterback, that's what he wants, that system, if he's the coach. Now, I think that's a long shot at this point. But look, I think that's the way the game's going. I've seen it at my alma mater, Louisville. I mean, Lamar Jackson's changed the landscape for them. He's a dynamic player, and you get a coach like Bobby Petrino who knows the pro-style passing attack and then has a guy that can move around. Well, I mean, then they're very difficult to stop. And we saw that with Alabama. I mean, the reason Alabama won that game was because Hurts' ability to make plays happen with his legs as well as LSU played on defense. So it's something to consider. And look, they've got guys coming in. They've got recruits on the board, not only the St. Stanislaus quarterback, who's more of a classic style system, but they've also got another recruit that's more of a dual threat, and they've got Lindsey Scott sitting out, who should have gone to Tulane, but is also going to be a candidate there as well.
Yeah. Les, what can you add?
Well, they definitely need to find a playmaker at quarterback. We've been saying this for years. And I got to give Danny Etling a lot of credit on the circumstances under which he had to come in and play for a guy who was not brought in to be the guy, and to be thrown in there early in the season with a team that was on the verge of making a coaching change. Things were so bad, and for him to stabilize that position and play as well as he did, not great, but just stabilize things, I think he did a great job. But to ask him to go out there and make plays behind that offensive line against Alabama is just too much. I mean, that wasn't going to happen. And they've had problems in the past, and whether they stick with a pro-style offense or they go to some sort of spread offense or however they want to run it, they have to have somebody at the quarterback position who can make plays with at least with his arm, and preferably with his arms and his legs, and they just haven't had that. You're not going to win the SEC with a game manager, and he's pretty good at that. You got to have a playmaker. He also has to be a game manager. He has to be a smart player. But he has to be a playmaker in addition to being a game manager. Maybe one of the guys on the roster or who's committed will be that player, but he's got to come from somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, every single week Dave Aranda impresses. The game plan that he had for Alabama was an incredible game plan. The guys bought in. We saw players that again were really showcased in this game, that stepped up and played well. This guy is a keeper, and the hope is that they're going to be able to keep him at LSU. I understand he is a contract at the university for 3 years. Doesn't matter if there's a coaching change or not. He can be retained. But the question is, when is someone going to come calling for him to be a head coach?
That's a huge question, and I think people will come calling. I mean, he was a candidate last year at Wisconsin for some lower-level head coaching jobs. Now he's at a big, at this big program and under such high profile. I think someone's going to come after him. He's got all the qualities to be a very good head coach. I'm surprised that his name hasn't even been mentioned for LSU. I know that that the staff, the administrators want a proven head coach with experience, so it kind of eliminates him. But he's done a terrific job. And look, he's got players to work with. I mean, there's a lot of NFL talent on that defense, but they played their tails off against Alabama and kept them in that game.
Your thoughts on Aranda?
Well, he's, I think, been everything they'd hoped he would be. And I think they should do everything they can to keep him long term. I think probably if Coach O got the job, which I think is very questionable at this point, like he said, I think Aranda would be comfortable sticking here and working with Orgeron as the head coach. If somebody comes along and wants to make him their head coach at some point, well, you may lose him. That's what happens with good assistant coaches. They become head coaches. But a coordinator is not going to leave LSU for a mid-level job. It's going to have to be a big-time job for somebody to lure him away. So you take care of him, you keep him around, compensate him the way he deserves to be compensated, and you can keep him for a while until the right head coaching job comes along. But he's been everything they've wanted him to be, and I think they need to do everything they can to hang on to him for as long as they can.
And let's bring up, I mean, we know this, I think, and we may have talked about it, Tom Herman, who's one of the prime candidates for this job, is a former roommate of Dave Aranda, so that's got to help. If they want to lure Tom Herman there, you would think he would want to keep Dave Aranda on.
Should Aranda get an interview for the head coaching job? Should he, when they're going out and they're bringing these guys in, should he at least get an opportunity to get an interview?
Yeah, I think he should get an interview. I don't know that how high he'd be up on the list. I don't think he's not going to get the job, and I'm not sure I would offer the job to him. But as a courtesy and to learn more about the guy, it doesn't hurt to interview him. I think you bring him in, and who knows, maybe in the interview he knocks your socks off. Maybe you look at him differently coming out of the interview than you do going in. I don't think he's going to get the job, but I think he deserves an interview. I think Orgeron, depending on what happens, you got 3 good teams in 19 days coming up, so we'll see what happens there. I think he deserves a long, hard look, but at this point, I think the LSU administration is looking to hit a home run in the public eye with their hire by going outside. I'm not sure who that person is, but I think they really want a big-name head coach to come in and take this job.
Jeff, if you would, talk a little bit about a possibility of Aranda getting an interview, and then kind of morph into some candidates you think should be interviewed by LSU or will be interviewed by LSU.
Well, look, Aranda definitely deserves it. I think you make a good point, Les. I mean, why not give him that courtesy as a tip of the cap for the job he's done? But they've already pretty much gone on record, Joe Oliva, that they want somebody with head coaching experience. So that pretty much, I think, in my mind, eliminates him from consideration, serious consideration. Obviously, Jimbo Fisher and Tom Herman are the top 2 fish. Those are the 2 people that I think that they clearly would love either one of them to take that job. But after that, you're talking about some wild card candidates. I mean, I forget the coach's name at Colorado, who's done a very good job, but he's someone that I think they'll look at. Now, Justin Fuente is an interesting name. He's in his first year at Virginia Tech. Would he be willing to leave Virginia Tech after only 1 year? They gave him, he's probably got a good relationship there with his athletic director who rescued him out of Memphis. But still, it's LSU. And he's done a tremendous job. And then there's that wild card guy, P.J. Fleck, who I love at Western Michigan, has revitalized their program. They're unbeaten, ranked for the first time ever. And he's a guy that I'm intrigued by. He's got NFL experience. He was a receivers coach for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And to go into Western Michigan and turn a program around like that is very impressive to me. And I think they need to get a guy that's got this, open offensive strategy. I think fans want that at LSU. They're tired of watching those Les Miles offenses. I think they want an offensive-minded guy. So someone like that intrigues me.
What can you add?
Yeah, but I agree with all that. But, let's face it, the guy who gets hired is being hired to match or surpass Alabama. Is Tom Herman at Houston with a guy at Western Michigan, a different type of athlete, throwing the ball all over the field to try and beat those teams in the MAC and whoever Houston plays? Is that the guy who's going to come in and go toe-to-toe with Alabama and compete for a national championship? Maybe they can. Good football coaches are adaptable. You can be a guy who throws it around the field and play a finesse game, and then when you're able to recruit the bigger guys, you can transition to that. But boy, LSU is not a job for on-the-job training.
Right.
And if they're going to get meet the expectations that their fan base has, I think there's an inherent risk with getting somebody who's never coached with the big boys in college football.
Right. Does that mean that maybe a guy like Jimbo Fisher might be an odds-on favorite, or is that ship sailed, in your opinion?
He looked a lot better a year ago, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're Jimbo Fisher,
right,
you want to leave Florida State for LSU. That's the question I have. I mean, he's got a lot better chance of winning a national title at Florida State than sitting there in the same division as the Goliath, Alabama. That's why I think Jimbo Fisher is a real long shot. I disagree with Les on Tom Herman, because Tom Herman's coming from the Ohio State tree. I mean, he coached under Urban Meyer. Most of the people in college football I've talked to think he's the next Urban Meyer. If he's at LSU with the athletes they have, I think they're going to be unstoppable. I mean, and I know people focus that they lost to Navy and that they've struggled lately, but he's also beaten Oklahoma, Florida State, and Louisville with Houston's athletes, and those are the big boys. He's beaten all three of them. So what could he do with the type of talent he has here? I think he's a home run hire,
right.
And I don't think there's very many other ones out there. And you're right. If they don't get somebody like that, who do they get? I mean,
right.
and in fairness, who can stand up to Nick Saban? I mean, there's how many people in the world? I mean, they have to go get Bill Belichick. I think is the only other guy I can think of that can stand toe to toe with him.
And Coach O's still in the mix, especially if he runs the table here, right, guys? Don't you think Orgeron's in the mix here? If he runs the table, or did he have to beat Alabama?
Well, I think basing that decision on one game would be very short-sighted. Okay, he didn't. Okay, he's not playing with his players, so you're going to say, okay, take the players that haven't been able to beat Alabama in recent years, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of your season, a month after you took the job, go beat Alabama. I think the way they performed against the way he got the defense to play with a big assist from Dave Aranda, and the way they competed with that team was impressive. They couldn't do anything offensively because of the players his predecessor brought in on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think you can hold him responsible for that. So I don't think Alabama should be a deal killer for him. It might be a deal killer with him for the administration. I think you got to see how they follow that up. Do they put that behind them? Do they go to Arkansas and beat a team that's beaten them the last 2 years? If they do that and come back and beat Florida and beat Texas A&M, I think you got to give Orgeron a serious look because of the job he's done in totality from the time he took over and the way he seems to have grown as a coach from the experience he had at Ole Miss. I'm not saying they'll do that. I'm saying I think that's what should happen. On the other hand, he's still got those 3 games to play. He's got no margin for error after losing Alabama.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This is the litmus test for Ed Orgeron.
Absolutely.
Coming up, I mean, look, he had 2 weeks to prepare for Alabama. They put everything in for that Alabama game, and they played their tails off, and they still lost. Now, can they rebound? You're right. And is he going to be in the mix? I think he'll be in the mix, but I think he's a fallback option right now. And I don't think he's a bad fallback option because I like what he's done so far. And I think he's learned to delegate. But as much of a question mark as some of these other guys that I mentioned were, because they haven't done it at the highest level, he's still a major question mark because of his record at Ole Miss. I mean, the program got worse every year he was in charge. And I think that's a huge red flag right now if you're looking at him.
But some will say that Houston not won with his players.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I never buy that. I'm not a big believer in that stuff. I mean, he managed the program, and they got worse every year. They didn't even win a game in the SEC. My point is, if Ed Orgeron is from Akron, Ohio, and his last name is, O'Shaughnessy, is he even being considered with the resume he's got?
There you go. Guys, Pelicans 0-8. Talked about it on my radio show today. Something's got to be done. Benson and Loomis have allowed this team to flounder. It sounds a lot like the Saints when we talk about the mismanagement of the cap, bad trades, bad free agent deals, re-signing your own, them not paying dividends. You look at right now, Dell Demps, I mentioned this to you last when we were in the green room earlier. If Dell Demps was in the D-League, he would have a championship team. He does a great job of bringing in backups, but has not been able to bring in starter types to be able to surround Anthony Davis. And pro sports is a bottom line business, and it's about wins and championships. And so far, this management team has gotten a pass here. At 0-8, another bad year. I think that ownership at this point has to prove to not just AD, but to the fan base that they want to win here in New Orleans, and it hasn't happened yet. Dell Demps continues to get a pass. Alvin Gentry, I don't think at this point it would be fair to be able to jettison him, but he's had a year now, and they've tried to put the players that work in his system around, and they're just not getting better. They seem to be regressing. And I know this is football time, but New Orleans needs a reason to go out and see pro basketball. And right now, I just see the fortunes of this team fading in terms of the eyes of the fan base.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. I mean, the games are very sparsely attended, and we're in the first week or two of the season. That's a bad sign. What's going to happen as the losses mount?
Yes.
But this team that they're putting on the court is just not capable of competing. with the elite teams in the NBA. Without Drew Holiday, he's the guy closest to being the Robin to the Batman of Anthony Davis. But you're right, it's a star-driven league. I mean, you look at, let's say, a team like the LA Clippers. They've got 3 great players, and the rest of their guys are guys like the Pelicans have. But they've got 3 studs, and that's what drives NBA teams. And right now, the Pelicans have 1. And they're just outmanned. They're in a gunfight with a knife.
Yeah, no doubt. Les?
Well, I think you touched on the biggest concern is that they seem to be getting worse. Okay, they were in the playoffs 2 years ago, and they decided that Monty Williams wasn't the guy that they wanted to stick with. He'd been there 5 years. He'd gone to the playoffs twice.
Right.
He guided them through a transition after they tore the team down, and they got lucky and got Anthony Davis. Got him back to the playoffs, but they said, no, he's not the guy that we're going to go forward with. And after 5 years, the players were still listening to him, which is not easy to do in the NBA. They've gotten rid of him, and they've gotten worse ever since. There's no indication they're getting better this year, although I'll admit they do have some missing pieces, especially Drew Holiday. When they get those guys back, I think they'll be a little bit better. But they're irrelevant in the Western Conference. They weren't irrelevant in the Western Conference 2 years ago. I think, I wrote this on sportsnola.com the other day, I think the leadership has to change. They have not put the pieces around Anthony Davis. They have not coached up the pieces they do have. And the one thing about Monty Williams is he came from San Antonio. He had a program he believed in. You're going to play defense first. We're going to put complementary pieces around our star, or stars.
Right.
And we don't care what your name is or how big a name you are. We're going to find the pieces that fit into our system. He and Dell Demps apparently didn't agree completely on what those pieces were. I think they tried to put some square pegs in some round holes. And I don't know what the program is that these guys believe in. Dell Demps, even though he came from San Antonio, Alvin Gentry came from a successful program in Golden State. I don't know what their program is. Whatever it is, it ain't working.
Right. Guys, should there be firings at this point? Do they have to prove to Anthony Davis and the fan base they're willing to do whatever it takes to win?
Well, I'm hesitant to call for a firing, this early in the season when everybody knew they were going to struggle. I mean, they pretty much came out and said, we're not going to have Drew Holiday. I mean, I think everybody recognized that. Look, things have gone probably worse than they expected, but they've lost 2 games in overtime. How would that change the dynamic? So I'm not ready to say that, but I think there's a huge question mark about the vision. What's the plan, like Les said? Where's this program going? I think the timing is going to be right here. It's critical. You've got Anthony Davis for 4 more years. If you do want to make a change, now's the time to do it because it gives you time to rebuild, a second rebuild around him, but you better do it soon.
Right. Les?
I agree. It's difficult to make a change 8 games into the season, but looking at how this organization and this team have proceeded, I'm not going to say progressed, proceeded over the last couple of years, it seems pretty clear to me that the people to get this turned around are not the people running the operation. Because the guys who are missing, I can understand giving them some time to try and pull out of this slump, see what happens when Drew Holiday gets back and they get these other guys, Tyreek Evans and Quincy Pondexter, who probably will have less of an impact than Holiday. Have some patience, see what they do, but I'm not optimistic that things are going to get better over the course of this season.
Let's head to the phone lines. Greg is in Houma. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey, I got a comment on the Saints and a question on LSU. Comment on the Saints is Saints are doing pretty good, and all we got to do is win the division. And the way the division looks, we have a shot at it. And there's not that many dominant teams in the NFC. So, even a wild card might be play. And my question on LSU is if a big-name coach comes in, what happens to all the coaches like Orgeron and all the staff? Or, like does Jimbo Fisher bring in his coaching staff from Florida? And I'll hang up and listen.
I think the only guy that's assured of a job if they have a coaching change is going to be Aranda because he's under contract to the university, right?
Well, but I mean, they could change
Right.
that out. But Greg's, to your point, is, I mean, it's going to be up to whoever comes in. I mean, he's going to either want to change out his staff, bring in his own guys. I'm sure he'll retain some of them. You don't want to lose these guys that know how to recruit Louisiana.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I think that's something that they'll take into consideration, whoever comes in.
Well, if they bring in a new coach and he isn't committed to keeping Dave Aranda, I think you've hired the wrong coach. So, yeah, I think he's the one guy you could count on sticking around unless something better came along for him. After that, it would be totally up to the new coach. Yeah, I agree. Aranda's the one guy you would expect to stick around, and you would certainly hope would stick around.
Tom is in Metairie. Tom, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Tom.
I'm going to make a comment about LSU and then a comment about the Saints.
Sure.
So LSU gets top-ranked guys every year, but their offensive line, if you watch just the offensive line, they can't seem to block Alabama players. The linebackers are free. Fournette gets the ball. 2 linebackers are hitting Fournette. They're throwing their tight end around like a rag doll. They got run over sometimes, thrown aside sometimes. I just don't get it, because if you compare them to A&M, Ole Miss, other teams that maybe don't get the highest of quality people, maybe A&M does, they move the ball in Alabama. We seem to not be able to move the ball. You know, and it's the same question every year. And secondly, on the Saints, do we get players accustomed to coming there and then get injured, like Laurinaitis? The guy doesn't miss a game, and here we have another guy on defense that's on IR. It just seems strange if we get so many players that, I don't know, they sit on the bench.
Yeah.
I'll hang it for listening, guys.
Thanks. Guys, anything you can touch on?
Well, Donnell Ellerby certainly stays on the bench. I mean, I've never seen a guy like him.
Me neither.
But you're right. I mean, but I think at this point, Tom, Laurinaitis was at the end of his career. They were hoping to milk another year out of him and bring him in for the intangible aspects, and it hadn't worked out. And, you know, he's still going to be a part of the team and be a leader, but I think his career is on the downside.
Well, I think injuries tend to be luck more than anything else, and they've had some misfortune there. Those things are cyclical, I believe. But as far as LSU, one of the problems LSU has is it plays the same brand of football for the most part as Alabama. And so when they try and run the ball, they're going right at Alabama's strengths. And in recent years, they've not been able to recruit players who can do that successfully. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, other programs, because they throw the ball around and don't try and go right at Alabama, they can have short-term success against them and move the ball a little better than LSU and maybe put a few points on the board. But I don't see them beating Alabama either, because they can't match up in other areas.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Great panel as always. Certainly appreciate your time. Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune and freelance reporter Les East. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also, you can catch us statewide on Pelican Sports Television. That's 9 p.m. each and every Friday night. You can catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That is weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com, and you can find every single episode of Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. The TuneIn Radio app is a great way to download, free download for your smartphone, great way to take the radio show with you anywhere. Again, special thanks to Jeff Duncan and also to Les East, and also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juneau, Naila Jones, Richard King, Philip Williamson, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching this week's edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you right back here next week for a prelude to the New Orleans Saints-Carolina Panthers game. Have a great week.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.